This deal is pure profit.
It's the war economy!
The lie we were taught. Every war begins with a story. A story about security. A story about freedom. A story about survival. But wars do not continue because of stories. They continue because they work. Not for soldiers. Not for civilians. Not for nations as people imagine them. They work for a system. A system so large, so normalized, and so deeply embedded in modern civilization that most people never notice it operating, except when bombs fall, prices rise, or loved ones disappear. This documentary is not about heroes or villains. It is about incentives. Because once you follow the incentives, you stop asking who started the war, and start asking who cannot afford for it to end. 1. What a war economy really is. A war economy is not simply an economy during wartime. That definition is comforting and dangerously incomplete. A true war economy exists when conflict itself becomes an economic input, not an emergency condition. In a normal economy, peace increases productivity. Stability reduces risk. Long-term planning is rewarded. In a war economy, instability generates revenue. Fear accelerates spending. Destruction creates demand. War is no longer a failure of the system. It is a feature. Weapons must be designed, tested, manufactured, transported, upgraded, and replaced. Data must be collected. Intelligence must be processed. Narratives must be managed. Enemies must be defined. Borders must be militarized. Surveillance must expand. Debt must grow. Every step creates contracts. Every contract creates profit. Every profit creates political protection. And once enough livelihoods depend on that cycle, stopping war becomes economically disruptive. That is when war stops being temporary. That is when it becomes permanent. 2. How modern war stopped looking like war. For most of human history, war was obvious. Armies marched. Cities burned. Borders shifted. Victors ruled. Losers rebuilt or vanished. Modern war is quieter, more abstract, more administrative. Today, war can exist without declarations, without invasions, without clear enemies, without endings. Instead, we have defense spending, security cooperation, strategic deterrence, stability operations, rules-based order. These terms sound bureaucratic. That is intentional. Because bureaucracy hides violence behind spreadsheets. A missile strike becomes a line item. A drone program becomes a jobs creator. A proxy war becomes a foreign aid package. A destroyed city becomes a reconstruction opportunity. The human suffering is real, but it is processed financially, not morally. 3. The transformation after World War II. World War II devastated much of the planet. But it also revealed something unprecedented. War could mobilize entire industrial civilizations and make them richer in the process. Factories expanded. Technologies accelerated. Governments centralized power. Debt exploded, but so did growth. After the war, leaders faced a dilemma. Peace was morally necessary, but economically, peace was inefficient. So instead of dismantling war infrastructure, they rebranded it. Standing armies replaced mobilized ones. Permanent defense budgets replaced emergency funding. Weapons research became innovation. Military alliances replaced direct conflict. The Cold War was not a pause in war. It was a business model upgrade. Weapons were built not to be used, but to justify continuous production. Conflicts were outsourced to smaller nations. Fear was maintained at a low but constant temperature. Enough to keep spending high, not enough to trigger collapse. This balance was not accidental. It was engineered. 4. The military, industrial ecosystem. The war economy is often described as a military-industrial complex. That phrase is now outdated. What exists today is an ecosystem. It includes weapons manufacturers, private military contractors, intelligence firms, surveillance technology companies, cybersecurity vendors, logistics giants, energy suppliers, construction firms, media outlets, think tanks, lobbyists, politicians, financial institutions. No single actor controls it. That's why it's so powerful. Each part benefits slightly from continued conflict. Together, they make peace politically expensive. A war economy does not need evil people. It only needs rational ones responding to incentives. 5. How human life is priced. In a war economy, human life is never described as priceless. It is described as acceptable losses, collateral damage, operational risk, civilian impact, strategic necessity. These phrases do not deny death. They budget it. Insurance premiums rise. Risk models adjust. Compensation funds are allocated. Public outrage is managed. Death becomes a variable, not a stopping point. This is not because leaders are heartless. It is because the system cannot function if every death is treated as unacceptable. A war economy survives by normalizing tragedy. 6. The psychology of permanent threat. No war economy can survive without fear. But not panic. Panic shuts systems down. What it needs is background anxiety, a constant sense that danger is everywhere. Enemies are watching. Preparedness is never enough. Sacrifice is necessary. Questioning is irresponsible. This psychology reshapes societies. Citizens trade privacy for safety. Debate becomes suspicion. Dissent becomes disloyalty. Complex problems become moral binaries. Once fear is internalized, coercion is unnecessary. People police themselves. 7. The effect on social values. War economies subtly rewire what societies value. Strength replaces empathy. Efficiency replaces ethics. Winning replaces understanding. Loyalty replaces truth. Children grow up surrounded by militarized language, heroic violence in entertainment, simplified good versus evil narratives, normalized surveillance, endless emergency rhetoric. War becomes cultural background noise. And when war is normal, peace feels unrealistic. 8. Why poor countries bleed first. War economies do not destroy powerful nations first. They destroy vulnerable ones. Conflicts are exported to resource-rich regions, politically unstable states, ethnically divided societies, strategically located countries. These places become testing grounds, proxy battlegrounds, arms markets, reconstruction laboratories. Their suffering subsidizes stability elsewhere. Their instability justifies further intervention. Their destruction creates demand for rebuilding contracts often awarded to companies from outside. This is not conspiracy. It is structure. 9. Debt, the silent engine. Wars are expensive, but modern states rarely pay for them directly. They borrow. Debt allows war to continue without immediate sacrifice from voters. Future generations inherit the cost. Inflation spreads it quietly across society. Debt turns war into a long-term financial instrument. As long as markets believe governments can service that debt, the cycle continues. And nothing justifies endless borrowing better than endless threat. 10. The moral paradox. Most people working inside the war economy do not see themselves as villains. Engineers design systems. Analysts process data. Contractors fulfill orders. Soldiers follow commands. Politicians respond to pressure. Each role is morally defensible in isolation. Together, they create something monstrous. Not because of cruelty, but because of fragmentation. When responsibility is divided enough times, accountability disappears. Modern global politics is not organized around peace. It is organized around managed instability. After the Cold War ended, many believed the world was entering an era of cooperation. Instead, the structure of the war economy simply adapted. Old enemies disappeared. New threats were defined. Terror, rogue states, hybrid warfare, cyber threats, extremism, strategic competitors. None of these concepts have clear endpoints. That is their value. A war economy does not fear victory. It fears resolution, because resolution ends funding, contracts, and relevance. 2. Alliances as economic dependencies. Military alliances are often presented as mutual protection agreements. In practice, they function as economic pipelines. Member states standardize weapons systems. Training programs align doctrines. Supply chains interlock. Maintenance contracts stretch decades. Once integrated, leaving becomes costly. Peace becomes risky. Autonomy becomes dangerous. Neutrality becomes suspicious. Alliances lock nations into the war economy, not through force, but through interdependence. 3. Why peace becomes politically unstable. A prolonged peace creates problems for a war-based system. Threat narratives weaken. Budgets face scrutiny. Citizens ask uncomfortable questions. Politicians lose leverage. So peace is reframed as temporary, fragile, conditional, at risk. Even ceasefires are described as pauses. Because if peace feels permanent, the system loses legitimacy. 4. The media's invisible role. Media does not create wars, but it curates perception. Conflict coverage emphasizes urgency over context, emotion over structure, events over systems, villains over incentives. Wars become episodic stories instead of continuous processes. Attention spikes. Outrage burns. Then exhaustion sets in. The cycle repeats. This does not require censorship. It requires speed. 5. Human behavior under permanent conflict. When societies live under constant threat, behavior changes. People accept surveillance, tolerate secrecy, trust authority over transparency, fear dissent more than violence, prioritize safety over justice. Children internalize conflict before understanding it. Adults normalize anxiety. Elders accept decline as inevitable. War reshapes not only borders, but psychology. 6. The Global South as a pressure valve. Much of the world's instability is concentrated in specific regions. Not randomly, these regions absorb proxy wars, arms testing, resource extraction conflicts, ideological battles, sanction pressure. Their chaos stabilizes others. This is not moral judgment. It is systemic reality. 7. Technology and the new battlefield. Modern war economies thrive on technology. Drones, satellites, AI targeting, cyber weapons, biometric surveillance. Distance reduces empathy. Automation increases scale. Algorithms remove hesitation. War becomes easier to start and harder to feel. 8. Economic distortions at home. War spending distorts domestic economies. Resources flow toward defense sectors, security technology, surveillance infrastructure, away from healthcare, education, social services. Inequality rises. Debt deepens. Civic trust erodes. War abroad weakens democracy at home. 9. The illusion of choice. Citizens are often told, this is necessary. There is no alternative. We must act. But necessity is rarely natural. It is constructed. Options disappear not because they are impossible, but because they threaten entrenched interests. 10. Part 2, Closing Turn. The war economy did not just create conflicts. It created a worldview. A world where stability feels suspicious, peace feels temporary, violence feels inevitable. And once people believe that, they stop imagining alternatives. When people talk about the cost of war, they usually mean numbers, casualties, budgets, destroyed buildings, lost GDP. These numbers are real, but they hide the most devastating cost of all. What war does to people who survive it. A war economy is not only measured in deaths. It is measured in distorted lives. Lives shaped by fear before they understand politics. Lives interrupted before they understand purpose. Lives trained to endure instead of imagine. This is where the true damage accumulates. Quietly, generationally, irreversibly. 2. Children of permanent conflict. Children raised under war economies do not experience war as an event. They experience it as an environment. Checkpoints instead of playgrounds. Sirens instead of lullabies. Screens filled with violence before literacy. Their nervous systems adapt. Hypervigilance becomes normal. Trust becomes dangerous. Curiosity becomes a liability. Many never develop a sense of long-term future, not because they lack intelligence, but because planning feels unrealistic. A war economy steals time before it steals life. 3. Families as collateral damage. Wars rarely destroy families instantly. They erode them. Fathers disappear into fronts, prisons, or exile. Mothers become providers, protectors, and mourners. Children grow up too early, or never grow up at all. Trauma is inherited. Silence becomes survival. Love becomes conditional on safety. When war becomes permanent, family structures weaken, not by ideology, but by exhaustion. 4. Trauma as a renewable resource. The war economy does not heal trauma. It manages it. Veterans are praised but undersupported. Civilians are documented but forgotten. Refugees are counted but contained. Mental health systems are overwhelmed. Communities normalize pain. Medication replaces meaning. Trauma becomes cyclical, and cycles are profitable. 5. The refugee reality. Displacement is not a side effect. It is a feature. War economies produce refugees at scale. Refugees are then politicized, criminalized, exploited, instrumentalized. They become bargaining chips in diplomacy, pressure tools in elections, cheap labor pools, human evidence of instability, used to justify further militarization. They lose citizenship before they lose humanity. 6. Moral injury. The invisible wound. Beyond trauma lies something deeper. Moral injury. The damage that occurs when people are forced to act against their conscience, or watch others do so with impunity. Soldiers ordered to dehumanize. Journalists forced to simplify. Doctors overwhelmed by impossible choices. Aid workers trapped between neutrality and survival. Moral injury fractures identity. People no longer ask, what is right? They ask, what is allowed? This is how ethics die without resistance. 7. How societies learn to accept the unacceptable. War economies shift moral baselines. What once shocked becomes tolerated. What once demanded accountability becomes normalized. What once required justification becomes routine. Extrajudicial killings, mass surveillance, indefinite detention, civilian casualties. Language does the work. Words soften reality until resistance feels naive. 8. The economic trap for ordinary people. While war enriches specific sectors, ordinary people pay the price. Inflation rises. Social spending falls. Taxes increase indirectly. Opportunities narrow. Young people face a cruel paradox. Fewer jobs in peace industries. More jobs in security and conflict-related fields. Violence becomes employment, and employment becomes dependency. 9. Lost generations. The most tragic outcome of war economies is not destruction. It is wasted potential. Scientists who become refugees. Artists who become silent. Teachers who become irrelevant. Children who become statistics. Entire generations learn how to survive, but not how to build. This loss is invisible in balance sheets, but it defines the future. 10. Part 3. The Quiet Revelation. Here is the truth rarely spoken. War economies do not need everyone to suffer. They only need enough people to suffer, so that fear, obedience, and distraction remain plentiful. The system does not collapse under human pain. It feeds on endurance, but endurance has a limit. And when that limit is reached, something changes. Not explosively, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Every war economy rests on one silent assumption. That conflict is inevitable, not tragic, not regrettable, inevitable. This belief is repeated so often by leaders, analysts, media, and even ordinary people that it becomes invisible. If war is inevitable, then preparing for it is rational. Profiting from it is pragmatic. Questioning it is naive. The system does not need you to support war. It only needs you to believe that peace is unrealistic. That belief is the foundation. 2. Why the system feels invincible. From the outside, the war economy looks unbreakable. It has money, technology, political protection, cultural normalization, fear as fuel. Attempts to oppose it often fail because they attack the surface. Individual wars, individual leaders, individual companies. But the system is not built on individuals. It is built on structure. And structures do not collapse from outrage. They collapse when incentives change. 3. The crack no one talks about. Here is the twist most people miss. The war economy is incredibly powerful, but also fragile. Not morally, economically, because it depends on 3 things remaining true. Debt must remain cheap. Public trust must remain manageable. Alternatives must remain unthinkable. If any one of these breaks, the system destabilizes. All 3 are now under pressure. For debt is no longer invisible. For decades, war was financed by future promises. Borrow now, pay later. Inflate quietly. But debt has limits. As interest rises, servicing past wars becomes more expensive than funding new ones. Budgets tighten. Trade-offs become visible. Citizens feel the cost directly. When war competes openly with healthcare, housing, and food, the illusion breaks. War is no longer abstract. It becomes personal. 5. Trust is eroding faster than fear. Fear once unified societies. Now it exhausts them. People no longer feel protected. They feel managed. Transparency is demanded. Narratives are questioned. Contradictions are noticed. When trust erodes, authority weakens. When authority weakens, coercion increases. When coercion increases, legitimacy collapses. This is not rebellion. It is fatigue. 6. The rise of uncontrolled alternatives. The most dangerous threat to a war economy is not protest. It is optionality. When people believe alternatives exist, neutrality, multipolar cooperation, decentralized power, local resilience, economic independence, the system loses its monopoly on imagination. War economies require a narrow future. Choice expanded. 7. Technology, double-edged power. The same technologies that strengthened war economies now undermine them. Information moves faster than control. Footage bypasses gatekeepers. Data leaks expose contradictions. Narratives fracture. Control requires scarcity. Technology creates abundance. This tension is unresolved and growing. 8. The final reality. Here is the deepest truth. War economies do not collapse because people become moral. They collapse because they become inefficient. When destruction costs more than production, control costs more than cooperation, fear costs more than trust, the system faces a choice. Adapt or break. History suggests it tries both. 9. The human role in the endgame. No individual can dismantle a war economy, but individuals shape what replaces it. Every time a society chooses transparency over secrecy, cooperation over dominance, long-term stability over short-term advantage, the system weakens slightly, not dramatically, but cumulatively. Empires do not fall in moments. They dissolve when too many people stop believing the story. 10. The final twist. The greatest illusion of the war economy is this: that humans exist to serve conflict. The truth is the opposite. Conflict exists because systems forgot how to serve humans. War is not inevitable, but war economies are, until enough people recognize them as systems, not fate. And once fate becomes a system, it can be redesigned. Final line. The war economy did not conquer the world with armies. It conquered it with acceptance. And acceptance is the only weapon it cannot defend against. Once it is withdrawn,